She had just ended a 3-year relationship with a man who treated her well. Kind, attentive, present at every important moment. He did everything right. And even so, she felt an inexplicable emptiness. 3 weeks later, she was obsessed with a guy who barely replied to her messages. A man who showed up when he felt like it, who had a reputation for never committing, whom all her friends told her to avoid. And it was exactly him who made her lose sleep. This contradiction is not a coincidence. It is a pattern that repeats itself millions of times, in silence, in locked bedrooms, in deleted browsing histories, in conversations that never make it to therapy. There is a brutal difference between what many women say they want and what actually awakens deep desire in them. And this difference creates an abyss that no one wants to admit exists. For years, society has built a narrative about healthy relationships. Respect, communication, equal partnership, emotional safety. All of these values are important and true for building something lasting. But here is the problem: they have nothing to do with attraction. Attraction does not follow moral rules. Desire does not care about political correctness. And the more we try to pretend these two worlds are the same, the more confusion we create. The public persona defends one thing. The private persona consumes something completely different. On social media, the discourse is about sensitive, vulnerable men who cry, who share domestic chores. But when the door closes, when no one is watching, the content that feeds fantasies tells the opposite story. Romances with obsessed mafiosos. Series about dangerous vampires. Erotic books where controlling billionaires dominate completely. Reality shows where the bad boys always get more attention. This phenomenon is not a moral judgment. It is a factual observation. The entertainment industry makes billions by exploiting exactly these archetypes because they work. 50 Shades of Grey did not become a global phenomenon by accident. Twilight did not sell millions of copies because Edward was emotionally balanced. Wattpad did not explode with stories about stable and predictable men. The market reflects real desires, not ideological discourse. And here begins the dissonance that silently destroys relationships. Men hear what is said publicly and try to shape themselves to fit it. They become more sensitive, more open, more emotionally available. And they discover, confused and hurt, that the more they do this, the less desire they awaken. The more they fit the declared ideal, the faster they are placed in the friend zone. The more they try to be the good man, the more they see their partners looking at those who do exactly the opposite. The central issue is not about who is right or wrong. It is about honesty. It is about recognizing that there is a deep layer of the human psyche that has not been domesticated by modern culture, that still responds to primitive signals of power, danger, challenge, and conquest. That fantasizes about scenarios that would never be defended rationally. Think about the stories that have stirred emotions for centuries. Beauty and the Beast. A woman who transforms a monster through her love. Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester. A dark and tormented man who only opens up to her. Pride and Prejudice. The arrogant and inaccessible man who finally surrenders. These are not narrative accidents. They are formulas tested by time because they touch something real and deep. The archetype of the dangerous man that only she can reach. The predator who chooses not to attack. The untamed warrior who lowers his guard only in her presence. These patterns repeat themselves because they create a powerful fantasy, the fantasy of being special, of being different from all the others, of having achieved something that no one else managed to achieve. But here is where everything gets complicated. When this man actually changes, when he becomes what she said she wanted, something strange happens. Interest evaporates. Attraction disappears. What was once exciting becomes boring. Because what generated desire was not the man himself, but the process of conquering him. It was not the relationship, it was the hunt. This explains cycles that repeat themselves in a painful way. Women who repeatedly choose emotionally unavailable men. Who fall in love with those who treat them badly. Who lose interest as soon as their partner becomes predictable. Who end stable relationships in search of something that is missing. And that something usually has a name: danger, challenge, unpredictability. Culture tries to suppress this reality because it is inconvenient. Because it does not fit the values we want to promote. Because admitting it out loud sounds like justifying toxic behaviors. But repressing the truth does not make it disappear. It only pushes it underground, where it causes even more damage. Observe behavior, not discourse. See who receives real attention on dating apps. Follow who captures genuine interest at parties and social gatherings. Analyze who appears in private fantasies, in stories that succeed, in characters that generate obsession. And you will see a clear pattern that completely contradicts the public narrative. This is not a question of all women. There are exceptions, there are nuances, there are different levels of awareness about one's own desires. But denying that a significant pattern exists is closing one's eyes to a reality that affects millions of relationships. It is condemning men and women to live in parallel worlds, speaking different languages, frustrated because nothing works the way it should. If you are enjoying this analysis, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And leave a comment telling us what you think so far and which city or country you are watching from. Let's uncover together this contradiction that no one has the courage to talk about openly. The question that hangs in the air is simple and disturbing. If female desire really worked the way public discourse claims it does, why does the multi-billion-dollar romantic and erotic entertainment industry go exactly in the opposite direction? Why do private fantasies so violently contradict publicly declared values? And most importantly, what happens when we finally stop pretending that this contradiction does not exist? The contradiction deepens when we look at the numbers. Dating apps reveal brutally honest patterns. Studies show that male profiles with signs of danger receive significantly more attention. Photos with motorcycles, tattoos, serious expressions, risky environments. Bios that suggest extreme independence, emotional detachment, an unpredictable life. All of this triggers more matches than profiles of smiling men, hugging dogs, showing sensitivity. It's not all women. That disclaimer needs to exist to keep the conversation honest. But it's a large enough number to create an identifiable pattern. Large enough to influence an entire industry. Large enough for men to notice in their own experiences that something doesn't add up between theory and practice. The central conflict is not only between discourse and desire. It is between consciousness and the unconscious. Between what the rational mind defends and what the primitive brain responds to. No one wakes up planning to fall in love with someone emotionally unavailable. No one rationally plans to choose partners who cause suffering. But it happens repeatedly because there is a deeper layer making decisions. That layer operates through signals. Excessive confidence. Calibrated indifference. The ability to walk away without fear of losing. The demonstration of other options. Focus on personal goals above the relationship. All of these behaviors trigger unconscious alarms that are interpreted as high value, superior genetics, a desirable partner. And here lies one of the most disturbing aspects. The more a woman tries to rationalize her choices, the farther she moves away from the truth. She will say it was the interesting conversation. That it was inexplicable chemistry. That it was a genuine connection. But if you map the patterns over time, you will see that they are always the same archetypes. Always men who represent some form of danger, challenge, or inaccessibility. The friend zone is a direct consequence of this dynamic. Men who are too available, too interested, too transparent are automatically categorized as friends. Not because they lack quality, but because they lack tension. They lack uncertainty. They lack that element of danger that activates the circuits of desire. And when confronted with this reality, the most common response is denial, even indignation. As if pointing out the pattern were a personal offense. As if observing recurring behavior were misogyny. But truth does not depend on approval. Truth exists regardless of how we feel about it. Think about the stories that dominate platforms like Wattpad, where millions of young women write and consume romantic fiction daily. The most popular male protagonists follow specific formulas. The violent mafioso who falls in love. The school bad boy who only has eyes for her. The controlling billionaire CEO. The dangerous vampire. The rebellious biker. The killer with a moral code. These are not stories about emotionally balanced men working through their issues in therapy. They are not romances about partners who divide domestic chores equally. They are always versions of the same archetype, the man everyone fears, but who becomes protective toward that specific woman. This archetype touches something deep because it offers two fantasies simultaneously. First, she is special enough to tame the untamable. Second, she has access to his power and protection without suffering the consequences of the danger. It is a fantasy of exception, of being different, of achieving what no one else can. But real life does not work like fiction. In real life, truly dangerous men cause real harm. Relationships with unstable people generate real trauma. And here another level of conflict emerges, the distance between fantasy and reality. Many women want the fantasy without the consequences. They want to feel that adrenaline, that intensity, that controlled danger. But when the danger becomes real, when the first signs of genuinely problematic behavior appear, the story changes. That's when the complaints begin. The trips to therapy. The venting to friends about how complicated he is. There is an idealized version of the dangerous man that exists only in imagination. One who is dominant but never abusive. Jealous but never controlling. Independent but always available when she needs him. Mysterious but completely faithful. This combination does not exist. These are contradictory traits that only coexist in fiction. Reality offers spectrums. Very secure men tend to be predictable. Very exciting men tend to be unstable. And the search for the perfect combination frequently leads to frustrating cycles where nothing is ever enough. Either there's no emotion, or there's too much drama. Either it's boring, or it's chaotic. Never at the ideal point. This internal conflict generates genuine suffering. It's not a matter of judging or condemning. It's about recognizing that there is psychological programming working against long-term interests. Programming that prioritizes short-term excitement over lasting stability. And men pay the price for this confusion. Good men, genuinely interested in building something real, are repeatedly discarded. Not for being inadequate, but for being too adequate. For not activating those primitive circuits of desire that respond to danger and challenge. Male frustration with this dynamic is understandable. They followed the rules. They did what was asked. They became vulnerable, emotionally available, respectful. And they discovered that these qualities do not generate attraction. They generate friendship. They generate platonic respect. But they do not generate sexual desire. The development of this conflict shows that there are no villains in this story. There are only people operating under contradictory programming, trying to navigate a social world that has changed faster than evolution can keep up with. Ancient brains trying to function in modern realities. And the collision between these worlds creates the chaos we see today in relationships. Now we arrive at the most uncomfortable point of this analysis. The moment when the pattern fully reveals itself. When the dangerous man finally changes. When he becomes exactly what she said she wanted from the beginning. Available, affectionate, predictable, safe. And it is at this exact moment that everything collapses. This is the cruel climax of the dynamic. The devastating irony that destroys relationships without anyone understanding why. She spent months or years fighting to domesticate him. Crying because he wouldn't open up emotionally. Complaining that he didn't give her enough attention. Demanding that he change, that he show vulnerability, that he truly commit. And when he finally does all of this, she completely loses interest. It's not immediate. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a subtle and painful process. She starts to find flaws she never noticed before. Complains that he's too clingy. Says she needs space. Misses the life she had when she was single. The messages from him that she once begged to receive now irritate her. The constant attention she demanded becomes suffocating. And she herself can't explain what changed. Because what changed wasn't him. It was the dynamic. The challenge ended. The conquest was completed. The monster was tamed. And now that she has what she fought for, she discovers that it wasn't what she truly wanted. What generated passion wasn't the relationship itself. It was the battle to obtain it. It was the uncertainty. It was the danger of losing him at any moment. Here is the brutal truth that no one wants to admit. For many women, desire dies when security arrives. Not because they are bad people. Not because they do this consciously. But because the psychological architecture of their desire was built on foundations different from those that sustain a stable relationship. This is where infidelity begins. Not with better men. Not with more suitable partners. But with versions of the original archetype. With men who bring back that sense of danger and unpredictability that the current relationship no longer offers. With people who still represent challenge, conquest, risk. everything that the domesticated partner ceased to be. And the guilt? The guilt comes later. The rationalization. The justifications. He changed. He's not the same anymore. We lost the connection. I don't feel that chemistry anymore. But the deeper truth is that he became exactly what she asked for. And what she asked for rationally does not coincide with what excites her primitively. This pattern explains why so many marriages die slowly. Why so many women feel guilty for not desiring their husbands, even when they do everything right. Why couples therapy often fails to solve the central problem. Because the problem is not communication. It's not the division of chores. It's not the lack of romance. It's in the very structure of desire. The good man ends up alone or in the friend zone. The dangerous man loses his partner as soon as he stops being dangerous. The cycle restarts. She goes in search of a new challenge. Of someone who still needs to be conquered. Of another monster that needs to be tamed. And the pattern repeats because the root was never addressed. Her friends don't understand. The family is shocked. How can she leave such a good man? Someone who loves her, who takes care of her, who would do anything for her. And she herself doesn't know how to answer. Because admitting the truth would mean recognizing something about herself that completely contradicts the image she has publicly constructed. This is the darkest moment of the analysis. When we realize that the problem has no easy solution. That awareness alone is not enough. That therapy doesn't help if the person is not willing to confront this deep layer of internal contradiction. That recognizing the pattern is only the first step of a much more difficult journey. But there is something even more disturbing. Some women discover this truth about themselves and instead of working to change it, simply accept it. They spend their lives jumping from relationship to relationship. Always in search of the next challenge. Always bored as soon as they get what they wanted. Leaving behind a trail of confused and hurt men who never understood where they went wrong. And the men? The men are trapped in an impossible dilemma. If they are too dangerous, they are considered toxic. If they are too safe, they are considered boring. If they try to balance both, they are accused of playing mind games. There is no clear path because the rules themselves are contradictory. Anger grows on both sides. Men feel deceived by a discourse that does not match reality. Women feel judged for desires they did not choose to have. And in the middle of this war of narratives, genuine relationships are destroyed. Good people end up alone. And cynicism takes over an entire generation that no longer believes in anything. This is the climax of this cultural contradiction. The point where all masks fall. Where pretending no longer works. Where the tension between discourse and reality reaches its limit. And where we must decide, will we continue denying this reality, or will we finally have the courage to look at it head-on and seek an honest answer? So what is the way out? How do we escape this psychological trap that destroys relationships and leaves everyone frustrated? The answer begins with something radical and uncomfortable: brutal honesty with yourself. The first truth that needs to be accepted is this: you cannot change what attracts you. Trying to repress deep desires because they don't fit your ideology does not work. Desire does not negotiate with moral values. It simply exists. And pretending it doesn't only makes everything worse. For women who recognize this pattern in themselves, the path is not self-blame. Guilt solves nothing. The path is to consciously recognize how your desire works and make adult decisions based on that. If you know you lose interest when the challenge ends, there are two honest options. First option: accept that long-term stable relationships may not be your priority at this moment in life. There is nothing wrong with prioritizing passion, adventure, and novelty. The mistake lies in selling one thing and delivering another. In making commitments when you know you will lose interest as soon as you get what you want. Second option: if you truly want to build something lasting, you need to do deep psychological work. You need to understand where this need for danger and challenge comes from. It is often rooted in self-esteem issues, unresolved trauma, learned patterns from childhood. And resolving this does not happen alone. It requires serious therapy, not just superficial conversations. The real work is separating attraction from love. Understanding that the adrenaline rush you feel with dangerous men is not the same thing as genuine connection. It is brain chemistry. It is dopamine. It is addiction. And like any addiction, it can be worked through and transformed if you are willing to put in the effort. For men, the lesson is equally harsh. Stop blindly believing the discourse and start observing behavior. I am not telling you to become a horrible person. I am telling you to stop erasing yourself in an attempt to fit into an ideal that does not generate real attraction. You can be a good man without being predictable. You can be kind without being weak. You can respect without submitting. You can care without losing your own identity. The problem was never being good. The problem was confusing goodness with lack of personality. Maintain your own interests, your own goals, your own life. Do not make your partner the center of your universe. That is not romance. It is emotional dependence disguised as love. And dependence does not attract anyone. It suffocates. Set clear boundaries. Do not accept disrespect. Do not tolerate manipulative behavior just because you are afraid of being alone. Paradoxically, the more you show that you can live without someone, the more that person values your presence. But here is the most important truth of all: not every relationship needs to work. Not every attraction needs to turn into commitment. And not every person is compatible with you, no matter how much you both try. If you are with someone who clearly operates on a pattern of eternal challenge, and you want stability, you are fundamentally incompatible. It is no one's fault. They are simply different programs. And trying to force compatibility where it does not exist is a guarantee of suffering for both. The deeper moral lesson here is not about men versus women. It is about the courage to be honest in a world that rewards hypocrisy. It is about the maturity to recognize your own contradictions and work on them instead of projecting them onto others. It is about understanding that you can defend progressive values and still have fantasies that contradict those values. That does not make you a hypocrite. It makes you human. The problem only arises when you deny this contradiction and demand that others behave as if it does not exist. The solution is not to return to old models of relationships. It is not about saying that men should be dominant and women submissive. That is a shallow simplification of a complex issue. The solution lies in creating space for honesty without judgment. Relationships work when both parties know and accept the truth about themselves and about the other person. When there is no facade discourse. When what is said publicly matches what is lived privately. When you can admit your desires without fear of social cancellation. The desire for danger, challenge, and conquest will not disappear from a human psyche just because we have built a more egalitarian society. These structures are far too ancient. But we can learn to deal with them consciously and responsibly. If you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And leave a comment. Have you lived this pattern? Do you recognize this contradiction in yourself or in people around you? Which city or country are you watching from? Let's build an honest conversation about this. The truth sets you free. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because only through truth can we make real choices. And only through real choices can we build relationships that truly work, not just in theory, but in everyday practice.